From blueprints to booming businesses, from groundbreaking to grand openings, this is Beyond the Blueprint. Join host Brad Howard as he takes you behind the scenes of growth and development in Mooresville, Lake Norman, and beyond. We're talking with the decision makers, the planners, the visionaries shaping our communities, giving exclusive insight into what happens before, during, and after projects that define our region. The future is being built right now. Let's go beyond the blueprint.
Good Friday afternoon, and thank you to those tuning in on the radio at 105.9 FM, 100.7 FM, 1400 AM, on social media, on WSICnews.com, and on demand with the WSIC News app. From blueprints to booming businesses, this is Beyond the Blueprint, and I'm your host, Brad Howard. Welcome to Beyond the Blueprint here on WSIC. And thank you to those joining us today for an extended look at the 2025 North Carolina municipal elections and what they mean for the Lake Norman region. Here's what happened on November 4th. More than 550 cities, towns, and villages across North Carolina held municipal elections, and that's a massive number of races. School boards, city councils, mayors, town commissioners, a huge amount of local democracy happened all across the state. But we're not going to cover all 550 communities today. That would be impossible. And instead, we're going to focus specifically on how Charlotte's election results rippled outward and impact the Lake Norman community so that many of you understand how this impacts the region that we call home. Because here's the thing about regional politics. What happens in Charlotte doesn't stay in Charlotte. It affects how Huntersville grows. It affects what Mooresville can do with infrastructure. It affects development patterns all across the lake. Think about this geographically. Charlotte is the regional economic engine. It's the big city that shapes how the entire region develops, what policies get adopted, what kind of development patterns emerge. Charlotte makes decisions and the surrounding communities feel the impact. So as we move north from Charlotte, you have Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davidson. They all sit adjacent to Charlotte, connected by I-77 and Highway 21. These communities are literally in Charlotte's growth path, and they are experiencing the development pressure as the city expands northward. Further north, you have Mooresville in Iredell County on I-77. And Mooresville is one of the, if not the fastest growing suburb in America. Then as we go north to Troutman and Statesville, also located in Iredell County, in the path of growth. So here's what we're going to talk about. First, we're going to examine Charlotte's political transformation and what it means for the region. Then, as we move north through each Lake Norman community, Huntersville, Cornelius, Davidson, Mooresville, Troutman, and Statesville, we'll discuss specific election results, zoning decisions that are upcoming, infrastructure challenges, and economic development opportunities. Because as Justin Kazepas always tells us, everything is hyper-local, just like politics. And we'll wrap with a comprehensive forward-looking perspective on the region's economic future, because despite challenges, Lake Norman is genuinely positioned for prosperity. So let's start with Charlotte and work our way north. So Charlotte moved decisively Democratic on November 4th. And I want to be clear about what that means because it's significant. Mayor Vi Lyles won her fifth term with 70% of the vote, and that's a commanding mandate in a major American city. 70% is not a squeaker. That's an overwhelming show of support for the incumbent mayor, and she defeated Republican Terry Donovan and Libertarian Rob Yates. She had a comfortable victory here. But here's where it gets interesting. Charlotte City Council is now 11 Democrats and 1 Republican. 11-1. one Republican on a 12-member council represents a historic change in Charlotte's municipal government. The 4 at-large Democratic incumbents all won re-election. All 4 So all 4 sitting council members won, and Charlotte voters kept them all. So 21% of the vote went to each of them. And if we move to the most competitive race in Charlotte, which was Kimberly Owens defeating Krista Bakari, 56 to 43.5%, and flipped what had traditionally been a more competitive seat, went decisively Democrat. And Bakari had great name recognition. She was an incumbent Republican who had represented that district, and she lost by a considerable margin. And here's something else. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, the school board is now entirely Democratic. Every single seat on the school board, which serves 1.4 roughly million people and educates hundreds of thousands of students, is now guided by an all Democratic-led school board. So this will affect curriculum decisions, funding priorities, education priorities, and as that grows north, that cascades into the North Mecklenburg areas of the Lake Norman community. So what does Democrat control at the Charlotte level mean for you if you live in Mooresville, Statesville, Huntersville, Cornelius, or Davidson? And here's the answer. It matters a lot. So Democrat-controlled government at city level typically prioritizes things such as environmental stewardship, infrastructure investment, affordable housing, managed growth rather than unlimited development. These aren't radical positions. They're part of the mainstream Democrat policy priorities. And here's what's important. These policies don't stay within Charlotte city limits. They ripple outward. They affect regional decision-making. They influence what developers propose in surrounding communities. They affect what kind of development patterns emerge across the entire Charlotte MSA, the Charlotte metropolitan area. So the most significant thing that happened wasn't just that Charlotte's political shift happened. It's what happened at the Mecklenburg County level. Charlotte voters approved a 1% sales tax for transit and transportation. 52.28% voted yes. Just above 50%, but it passed. And here's what that means. The Red Line commuter rail, a 25-mile rail project running from uptown Charlotte through Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davidson, with a potential extension into Mooresville and Iredell County. This represents the most significant transportation infrastructure investment in decades into the Lake Norman region. So let's talk about what the Red Line could mean. So imagine living in Davidson and you work in downtown Charlotte. Right now you sit on 77 during rush hour. You fight a 45-minute to an hour commute. With the Red Line, you could potentially cut the commute to 30 minutes. The transit infrastructure puts an enormous pressure on Lake Norman municipal leaders to think regionally. They're going to be negotiating how the Red Line serves their communities. They're going to be making zoning decisions anticipating or resisting transit-oriented development. The newly elected commissioners and mayors we're discussing today will literally be shaping the next generation of development patterns for the Lake Norman region. So depending on which side of the argument you are on, if you're for or against, this is a step in everything moving forward. So it's how do we work with this? How do we deal with this shift as it happens over the next decade or more? So the economic implications of Charlotte's political shift. Let's go back. Charlotte's 11-1 Democrat majority will most likely pursue specific policies. They'll emphasize walkability, making communities more pedestrian friendly, transit-oriented development. We'll put apartments and retail uses near train stations or transit stations. Environmental standards will mean regulating what gets built and how it gets built. There will be affordable housing mandates requiring developers to include more workforce housing options in development plans. Some people love these policies. Some people oppose these policies. That's fine. That's what makes us a wonderful republic to live in. But here's what's important to understand. These policies have extraterritorial reach, which means they affect the surrounding communities. You know, one change in Charlotte impacts Huntersville, impacts a change in Cornelius, impacts Davidson, and so forth and so on. Charlotte's development standards affect what developers propose in the Lake Norman region because when you look at the real estate market, it's a regional, not a local market. And if the Charlotte requires environmental standards, then developers doing business in the Charlotte area adjust their projects to meet those mandates. When Charlotte makes infrastructure investments, building transit, water systems, expanding roads, these investments create opportunities or constraints for the surrounding communities. For example, if the Red Line does get built, there's an opportunity for Lake Norman, but it requires regional coordination. And the communities have to rezone the properties around the stations. They have to think about density. They have to be forward-looking and think long-term about change. So the questions facing these current elected leaders and the newly elected leaders in the Lake Norman region is a straightforward one. Do we align our zoning and development policies with Charlotte and their vision? Do we support the Red Line? Do we oppose the Red Line? Do we rezone for transit-oriented development? Do we oppose transit-oriented development? Or do we pursue independent paths? Do we resist density? The real question is, how do the communities work together regionally as we see density move north out of Charlotte? Before we make the move to Lake Norman communities from the Charlotte area of discussion, we need to understand the economic power that drives Charlotte, because it's really important to the context of the discussion. Charlotte is North Carolina's largest city. It's the undisputed economic center of the region. The Charlotte MSA has over 1.4 million jobs as of July of 25. It is a massive employment base. And here's what's remarkable. The region added 38,700 jobs year over year. That represents 44.5% of the state's total job growth. While the Charlotte region represents only a portion of North Carolina's population, it's generating nearly half of the state's new jobs. The unemployment rate in Charlotte is 3.8%, lower than the national average of 4.2%. The job market is tight and competitive. And if you're looking for work, the opportunities exist. But the employers are also competing hard for the talent. In the first quarter of 25, the region announced over $300 million in capital investment, with 611 announced jobs. That's 13% growth year over year. Most of that investment is in advanced sectors, advanced manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, technology, and machinery and manufacturing. For Lake Norman community sitting in Charlotte's metro area, this dynamic economy creates both opportunity and pressure. Companies relocating to Charlotte need workers. Where do the workers live? Many of those choose the Lake Norman region for the combination of proximity to Charlotte and the quality of life at the lake. That's why Mooresville is the fastest growing suburb in America. And as we shift into the red line discussion, let me explain what it really is, because it will be central to the future of development decisions along the line. The red line uses the existing Norfolk Southern rail corridor that CATS purchased in September of 2024. The official purchase committed to CATS to the project and is to be completed. The design portion was to be completed in 2025. The concept of trans-oriented development combines mixed-use housing, retail, offices, and transit access to the stations. This is fundamentally different from sprawling suburban development patterns that we've become accustomed to. The stations would function not just as park and ride lots. They would be integrated mobility hubs with bus service. So the first and last mile connections would be via bikes and scooters, and surrounding transit development with apartments, shops, restaurants, and offices would all be within walking distance. And none of this happens overnight, if it happens. So the red line's best case scenario would be 8 to 10 years from now. If it was completed in, say, 2033 to 2035, it would reshape the way people live and work in the Lake Norman region. But again, it's not going to happen overnight. There would be permitting, design work, construction, more than a decade of process. And something critical that happened in 25, in North Carolina, there was session law passed that stated that Charlotte cannot purchase land outside of Mecklenburg County without approval from each county and municipality first. This gives Iredell County and Mooresville true negotiating leverage. So before this law, Charlotte could theoretically have extended the red line to anywhere it wanted. Now local leaders have genuine authority to control whether the red line comes into their community. They can negotiate the terms. What does the red line cost our community in property disruption? What property tax benefits do we receive? What zoning changes would be required? It gives the towns to the south, especially Mooresville and Iredell County, a seat at the table. And will be something that fundamentally reshapes our region if it happens. And before we move away from the red line and talk about Lake Norman, let's talk about the job market, because jobs are ultimately what drive population growth and housing demand. The Charlotte region is projected to add 153,000 jobs between 2022 and 2032. That would be another roughly 12% growth in employment and a substantial job creation over the next decade. We just discussed the rapid job creation that's happening in the Charlotte MSA over the last few years. It's not going to slow down anytime soon. So where's the growth happening? The largest growth comes from the healthcare and social assistance. There's about 27,000 jobs. And they're good jobs. They're healthcare professionals, nurses, technicians, and administrators in a growing field. Professional, scientific, and technical service jobs, about 18,000 of those are engineering firms, technology companies, consulting practices, higher wage jobs requiring higher education. Other growth sectors include arts and entertainment, recreation, management, computer, and mathematical operations. For Lake Norman specifically, the job growth means demand for healthcare workers, tech professionals, managers, skilled trades, all occupations that can support Lake Norman housing demand. And if you're a nurse, a tech worker, or a project manager, you're the employee that Charlotte companies are hiring. And you're exactly the employee that Lake Norman communities need. People with good jobs, stable incomes, and the ability to support schools and businesses. And we will now transition back to North Carolina's business climate as we move into a local focus on the towns to the north from Charlotte. This is Beyond the Blueprint, and I'm Brad Howard. I will be right back. And we're back on Beyond the Blueprint with Brad Howard. And we're going to talk about the demographic trends driving Lake Norman growth. Why are people moving to Lake Norman in the first place? What's driving this growth? Several demographic trends are at play. First, remote work exploded since 2020. If you're a tech worker, you might work for a company headquartered in Charlotte but live in Mooresville because you love the lake. You get the job, but the lifestyle is something you can't replace. Second, retirees are moving to Lake Norman. You spend your career in a big city, you make your money, you retire to Lake Norman. You get to golf, you get to enjoy the water, and you get a beautiful community. Retirees have money, and they're looking for quality of life. So when they relocate to a region, they bring their investments with them. And why not move where life is slower, life is fun? And Lake Norman delivers that. And third, younger families are moving here seeking larger homes at a more reasonable price than a lot of communities nationally. So, a young family may pay a home, it may be 20, 30%, less in the Charlotte MSA than it is, say, in San Francisco or New York or a much larger city where the cost of living is higher. And then you can enjoy a different quality of life. And fourth, the lake itself is irreplaceable. There's no other Charlotte area community that has, a 32,000 acre lake that's a permanent competitive advantage for the region with the geography. The demographic trends are going to continue as Charlotte gets more expensive, as people work remotely, as more retirees look for active adult communities. Lake Norman will continue attracting people. And then this will be the last thing we cover on Charlotte before we shift our focus completely to the north, is the 1% sales tax that did pass. It barely passed, but it was still a win. And what that means is it's remarkable where it passed and where it failed. So it passed strongest in Charlotte, and it failed in Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davidson. It failed in North Mecklenburg, and it failed in Matthews. It failed in places that don't see the direct red line benefit. So this will tell you something. The voters who see themselves as beneficiaries of the transit system, the people whose communities will get the stations, the peoples whose communities will improve, voted for this. The voters who didn't see the direct benefit were skeptical. But the passage of this means that the red line is going to happen. It isn't speculative. The voters approved the funding. The 25-mile rail corridor is being purchased, and the project will move forward. And over 30 years, this transportation tax should generate around $19.4 billion. The money is allocated 40% to rail and 40% to roads, 20% to buses. So it's not all going to fund the rail project. It's going to fund equally 40% of the funds the same as the 40% to the rail, would go to the roads and 20% to bus routes. So roads are still getting the significant investment, and buses are getting an investment. But the rail, more specifically, the red line, is the centerpiece of the discussion. The initial project focused on bus frequency improvements, upgrades to bus stops, road widenings, pedestrian crossings, sidewalks, traffic light synchronization. So right away, before the red line's built, a decade or so from now, we're going to see improvements on the system. So let's start now. Let's talk about the politics and how everything is. And I went a little longer in the first segment than I should have. So we're going to move through this quickly, starting with Huntersville. Huntersville elections for the mayor and the 6 board commissioners were on November 4th. Christy Clark was reelected with 64% defeating Derek Partee, who received 35% of the vote. Clark will continue leading Huntersville through this rapid growth period. For the Board of Commissioners, these are critical positions because Huntersville commissioners make zoning decisions for the town. Huntersville voters elected 6 commissioners from a field of 9. The winners represent a mix of perspectives. You had Cornett, a Democrat, Smallwood, a Republican, Hunt, a Democrat incumbent serving as mayor pro tem, reelected, and Quarles, a Democratic incumbent, reelected. The balanced slate shows that Huntersville voters wanted diverse representation rather than a one-party control. So they wanted Republicans and Democrats working together on their board. So here's the impact for the future of Huntersville, the zoning decisions that will shape the town for the decade to come. So in March, the planning board unanimously recommended rezoning for something called Mission Stumptown. It was a massive mixed-use development at Stumptown Road in 21. Mission Stumptown was 247 apartments, mostly studio and 1 bedroom, 16 attainable housing units, specifically for teachers, police officers, and essential workers, and a commercial village with a mix of 6 buildings for retail and restaurants. And it's located a half mile from the Cats Park and Ride lot, and it's positioned for the red line. The board voted on this rezoning in April of 25. The newly elected commissioners will manage the implementation and future modifications. Additionally, the planning board approved Station South, another project with 348 multifamily units, also positioned for the red line. These developments position Huntersville as a transit hub town. The leadership is literally betting the red line happens and planning accordingly in Huntersville. The question for the newly elected commissioners is, do we continue our forward-thinking approach, or do we pull back? And that is for them to decide. And as we move to Cornelius gave us one of the election's most dramatic stories. It was a rematch from 2 years ago. So Dennis Bilodeau won this race with 3,181 votes and beating incumbent Woody Washam with 2,673 votes. Bilodeau defeated Washam by roughly 508 votes. And the interesting part is 2 years ago when Mayor Washam defeated Dennis Bilodeau, or now Mayor-elect Bilodeau, by just 5 votes, which really proves the importance that every vote matters when you're running a race. So what changed? Voters changed their mind. Voters who voted for Mayor Washam 2 years ago voted for Mayor-elect Bilodeau this year. Traffic seemed to be a big concern. Bilodeau's platform emphasized traffic flow and infrastructure improvements. 2 years ago, the voters may or may not have seen the urgency in it. Today, sitting in traffic, they spoke out and wanted change. But Mayor Washam has had an 8-year run as mayor of Cornelius, and he expressed in his comments gratitude for the community support and wished the new board success. And he's done an amazing job in his tenure there. So for the Board of Commissioners, all 5 seats went to incumbents. and one returning commissioner. That's stability. So you have Osborne, Johnson, Sansbury, and Carney all reelected, and Firk regained the seat he had lost in the previous election. So what does this mean for traffic? So with this new board in Cornelius, Bilodeau is going to need the commission to work with him on traffic solutions. The good news is the commissioners are experienced and most are incumbents. The challenge is they've had 8 years to address the concerns, and that was an issue that is the reason Bilodeau unseated Washam. So either they need to get more aggressive or they need new strategies, and that is for them to work through and decide. As we move forward from Cornelius, we're going to move to Davidson, and Davidson provided the clearest mandate of a Lake Norman community, re-electing Mayor Rusty Knox by an overwhelming 95.5% of the vote. So 95%. That's about as close to unanimous as you can get in modern politics. That's not just approval, that's an overwhelming endorsement that Davidson loves Rusty Knox. So Davidson residents are exceptionally satisfied with his leadership, and that is the mandate. So for the town commissioner, 6 candidates competed for 5 seats. Based on the vote totals, the winners for the 4-year terms were Autumn Ryerson Michael, a high school civics teacher, Tracy Madison Brandon, a campus minister and strong advocate for affordable housing, Steve Justice, Ray Fay, and Connie Wessner. David Lusk from Davidson Point, who ran, which is the Iredell County portion, was not elected. And he was the first candidate that we know of from the Mooresville side or from the Iredell County side to run for Davidson Commission. Davidson's key challenges are straightforward. How do you maintain character while accommodating growth? And that's the fundamental tension. You want the town to stay small and intimate, but people want it to move forward so it grows. So how do you provide affordable housing for teachers, police officers, essential workers? These are people that make the community run, that make the community function. And if they can't afford to live in the community, then you're going to lose them. How do you prepare for the potential red line development? The red line might come, it might not, but if it does, you need to be ready, you need to be prepared. Davidson candidates discussed affordable housing through public-private partnerships, community land trust, rental assistance, faith-based initiatives, and looked at a comprehensive approach instead of just zoning for affordable units. The county with its regional coordination and challenges. And we will cover that when we get right back. This is Beyond the Blueprint. This is Brad Howard, and we will be back in a moment. Welcome back to Beyond the Blueprint. Brad Howard, and we've examined Charlotte's regional dominance and the 3 Mecklenburg County towns to the north. Now we're moving into Iredell County, which is Mooresville, Troutman, and Statesville. Mooresville is the fastest growing suburb in America. Not the fastest growing suburb in North Carolina, not the fastest growing in the Southeast, the fastest growing suburb in America. The population exploded from 39,000 to over 50,000 between 2020 and 2022. That's nearly 30% growth in 2 years. And that growth brings enormous challenges. Traffic congestion on 150 has reached crisis levels. Water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, highway infrastructure strained. So here are the results from the election. Mayor Carney won, who is the incumbent, and Frank Owens, who was previously on the board, defeated an incumbent. And then Gary West re-elected to his seat. And the newcomer defeated Dana Tucker, defeated Lisa Qualls for Ward 4, which is the west side of 77 primarily. So the significant story. 2 incumbent town commissioners lost their seats. 2 incumbents, Mooresville voters, sent a message. We want you to look at things a little differently and prioritize development and infrastructure. Why did voters make these changes? Because infrastructure challenges are impossible to ignore. Traffic congestion on 150s reached critical levels. But here's the good news, progress is underway. In February of 25, NCDOT kicked off the $250 million project to widen Highway 150, and that is what's happening. The first 15-mile segment is underway now, and the project will extend all the way to Highway 16 beyond 2030 on a timeline. The Brawley School Road widening project is underway to support the mixed-use development on the Mooresville South side. Works should be complete on that in 2027. So the infrastructure is getting improved. There are a lot of orange barrels around Mooresville. The Rocky River wastewater treatment plant is approaching its capacity, but Mooresville has available capacity well into the mid-2030s. So expanding the treatment plant would cost over $130 million. That's a massive investment. That investment has to happen, but it means utility bills may go up for residents and businesses. But based on comparable infrastructure around projects in North Carolina, the utility bill increases may be in the $40 to $60 range over the next decade. For businesses, obviously, the numbers will be higher. Proposed data center that was in Mooresville did not move forward. Other things that are happening in town, Planning Board voted against recommendations for multiple large residential developments, citing infrastructure concerns. Newly elected commissioners will face immediate decisions about whether to uphold the Planning Board recommendations or override them. This will be the first major test to react to how the voters, the message the voters sent. So Mooresville is not just dealing with infrastructure issues. The town has a robust, diversified economy that's driving its growth. That's actually the core tension in Mooresville, is the economic opportunity is attracting people, but the infrastructure is slow to keep up. So Mooresville, known as Race City, USA, is nearly 70% of North Carolina's motorsports manufacturers choose to call this home. Penske Racing, JR Motorsports, Spire Motorsports, the cluster represents high-skilled, high-wage manufacturing jobs. These are skilled positions. So Lowe's has their headquarters here. Corvid, Duke Medical has a new facility here. Other major investments. There's an aftermarket manufacturer for just took 111,000 square feet in outside of Talbot Park. They're off Cornelius Road. Corvid Technologies is investing another $29 million. It's creating 360 jobs. And there's an Italian-based garden hose manufacturer establishing U.S. headquarters, bringing 144 jobs. Manufacturing accounts for 14.5% of Iredell County's employment. That's real economic activity, not speculative economic activity. Mooresville is an economic engine for this region. The newly elected commissioners will face major zoning decisions immediately. There's a rezoning for 400 homes that's waiting, that went through the planning board, that will be through the new board. There's several other communities that will be on the agenda. The Mooresville Tomorrow plan, the town's future land use plan, is almost complete. The newly elected commissioners will be responsible for implementing this vision or overriding it. So that's that will be up to them. So Mayor Carney and the new board will choose whether development slows down, stays status quo, or what changes are made, and that is their discretion. And in reference to Troutman, after the election, they will have some issues to work through as it relates to a moratorium, a newly imposed 30-month moratorium due to utility infrastructure while they work on their sewer concerns. It will be interesting to see how that plays out. And as we move further north into Statesville, Statesville is a part of the same utility question with Troutman and Mooresville as well as Troutman's utilities. The water, the sewer actually flows north and south. Part goes to Statesville and part goes to Mooresville. Statesville's growth is poised to explode. So Statesville is a city with deep roots and big ambitions, beautiful historic buildings, a beautiful downtown. It has been undergoing a remarkable transformation. But underneath that success is an aging water and sewer system that requires replacement. So the results from the election are Kasi Kute was mayor for a long time, and there's a new mayor, Doug Hendricks. So Mayor-elect Hendricks. Then there were other newcomers to the scene. Doug, his background was significant civic involvement. He spent 40 years in the banking industry and retired in 2023, and looks to bring his investment in the community, his civic role in the community, to help guide the city as it moves forward. He's a relationship builder, somebody who understands how to navigate complex civic challenges. Now he'll be a mayor in a divided city where 70% of the voters chose other candidates, but this is how they come together and they move forward. For the Statesville City Council at large seats, Trey Robertson won, and James Presley. Those will be the two new at-large seats. And then Statesville City Council Ward 3, Doris Allison won. And in Ward 5, James Tip Nicholson won. So what do the results mean? Statesville voters chose entirely new leadership across the board, but it wasn't an overwhelming mandate. It was a close election with tight margins. So Mayor-elect Hendricks will need to build a consensus and work with everyone to guide the city forward. The city's in the middle of a $20 million state-funded project replacing 6 miles of water main through downtown, and that's massive infrastructure work. While dealing with this infrastructure, Statesville's downtown has genuinely transformed. And Statesville's streetscape project delivered results: $7.6 million in new private funding, 8 new businesses, 8 building renovations, facade improvements, 33 net positive jobs created, city-widened sidewalks to 20 feet, buried utilities, added mature trees, improved drainage, created pedestrian-friendly spaces, and developers have cited the streetscape as the reason for investing in downtown. Downtown Statesville Development Corporation was designated 2025 accredited program by Main Street America and is an elite recognition. Only 73 Main Street communities in North Carolina have received that. So let's step back and take a look at the big picture as we go from Charlotte to Statesville. Lake Norman sits within one of America's most dynamic regions. North Carolina is ranked #1 state for business in 2025 by CNBC. This marks the 3rd time in 4 years our state won this honor. The Tar Heel State is winning because of a solid economy, a strong workforce, and a business-friendly environment. North Carolina's GDP grew 3.7% last year. That's the 5th strongest in the country. The state added 60,000 jobs last year. North Carolina has announced over $20 billion in investments, including 23,000 jobs. Companies are investing in North Carolina because of the business climate, the workforce, the lack of major regulatory burdens. It is a great place to do business. The Charlotte region is specifically booming. The Charlotte MSA has 1.4 million jobs as of July 2025. The region added another 38,700 jobs year over year. Unemployment rate is 3.8% lower than the national average. Q1 saw $339 million in announced new capital investment. That's 13% year over year growth. So here's my take. The Charlotte region is one of the best places in the country to choose to have a business, raise a family, and retire. The Lake Norman region is all of that together. So we live in one of the greatest areas in this country. We may not all agree on everything, but if we come together and we make the right decisions, we will keep this region as wonderful as it can be, and a place that our children and grandchildren will aspire to call home. I'm Brad Howard, it's Beyond the Blueprint, and we will see you next Friday at 3.